the DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission. I would ask him two questions. So after listening to the words of Ms. Costa, who gave us this perspective and overview, I would like to maybe ask you to focus a bit more on the work of the Commission in the context of that, and asking you what are the measures, most recent measures taken in this area, and with your insights also from the Director General, what are the issues at stake now for developing quality and inclusive VET? And in this framework, what is the role of centers of vocational excellence? This recent initiative by the European Commission, what is their role to play for inclusive and integral education in the EU? So this would be the question. Thank you very much, Mr. Santos, for being here. You have the floor.
So good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Emilio. And I would maybe start by congratulating you and Renato for organizing this event. I was very envious of seeing Alfredo in Nairobi with all our African friends there, because I lived most of my life in Africa, and I'm always very emotionally attached to these images of Africa. Well, I'm lucky that I'm speaking just before Miriam, because after what Father Prieto said, and Janine, I have very little to add, but I'll try to give some elements, always risking already mentioning some things that the colleague said before. I think Father Prieto put the discussion in a very well context when he mentioned the role of VET in a Christian and humanitarian spirit, which is in fact is very much what underlines the essence of VET. And then, of course, Janine mentioned already the institutional framework that was set up in order to give a strategic view to VET in the next decade. I will just try to say that, in the context of COVID, I think that if COVID had any positive impact, was the fact that it brought a sense of urgency to quite a lot of the work that we were already doing in education and training. But as I said, it sort of speeded the way forward. It gave a sense of urgency that before didn't exist. Just to talk about digital skills, for example, for many years we've been talking about this. I mean, the digital technology is not something that appeared yesterday. We've been talking about it, but when we were having discussions, we always had this idea that, this is something to do in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And suddenly, as from March last year, we had a wake-up call and we saw the impact that the lack of digital skills, the lack of use of digital technologies in VET in particular, because we have, as you know, one of the key elements of VET, the work-based learning, apprenticeships, and so on. And we saw that if there was any sector that had a very big impact as a result of COVID and millions of learners having to stay at home, VET was particularly affected. But just to say that as a result of this, I think the new commission has one of its most important policy initiatives to go forward, this Green Deal, and ensuring that we have people with the skills that can support the transition, both the digital as well as the green transition. But in this context, I just want to highlight that we had three areas of action that you've seen over the last year. The first one is on policy initiatives. The second one, I would say, is on the financial packages, the financial means to help the member states, to help the VET providers, to help the social partners pursue their actions in terms of education and training. And the third area was the launch of specific activities that help implement the policy objectives using EU funding as well as national funding. So these are the three areas: policy, funding, and policy initiatives. And on these, I would just like to spend a few minutes, if you allow me, first of all, to say that most of the work that we do on VET is inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a specific goal on education to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all. Of course, this inspires a lot of the work that we do at the European level. Then, of course, we have the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is it not by chance that the first principle of this European Pillar of Social Rights is on education and training and lifelong learning, but with a quality and inclusive perspective. It is part of the text. It's very much there. And maybe I take the opportunity to congratulate my co-citizen Janine for the excellent work that the Portuguese presidency has been doing, in particular the social summit that took place in Porto very recently. So I would say that if you want these two big umbrellas, the European Pillar of Social Rights and the Sustainable Development Goals, sort of inspire the work that we are trying to do in vocational education and training. And in that respect, last year was very productive. Janine has already mentioned quite a few, but I'd just like to remind the European education area as the general umbrella of everything we do then at the sectoral level, including VET, including schools, including adult learning and higher education. And then if you go and look into detail, each of these sectors then has developed their own way of trying to deliver on empowering people with the skills for these big challenges we have of the digital and green transitions. In particular in VET, it was already mentioned, we had the VET recommendation adopted last year during the German presidency, and also the Osnabrück declaration that we already talked about. And both of these, if you see, they focus on this dual role of VET, on promoting competitiveness, equipping people with the skills to contribute to a sustainable economy, and at the same time this inclusive element. Because if there's any sector, I don't want to publicize too much VET, but I think if there's any sector that has an important role in social inclusion, it is certainly VET. As I said, VET contributes to competitiveness, but it is also a means to allow all those that for some reason did not manage to be successful in the traditional education sector, that dropped out of the education system, that never had the opportunity as young. So all the adults, and once again, Janine knows this very well because Portugal is very much affected by us. We have an adult population with very low levels of qualifications. That's why we had the Novas Oportunidades initiative a few years ago. But what I'd like to say is that VET has this dual role of providing the economy with people equipped with skills to contribute to competitiveness, and at the same time provide a sort of a safety net for all those that for some reasons of life didn't have opportunity to go to education while they were younger, or even while younger they drop out of the system. VET is there to support them. I think this is extremely important. Both the VET recommendation as well as the Osnabrück declaration are very important in that respect, because they set a policy framework of what can be done. And of course, I'd just like to remind the upskilling pathways, another very important initiative that was already adopted a few years ago, that is aimed at providing adults with the minimum level of qualifications that allows them not only to contribute in terms of finding a job, but also in contributing to society, being active citizens. And I think that, when we're talking about digital skills, we tend to always think about the economy aspects only, but the social dimension is extremely important. I give you the example of my mother, which I mention quite often. My mother, when she wants to book a medical appointment or do a tax return, she asks me to do it because she doesn't have the digital skills. So digital skills is extremely important, not only for the economy, but for people to feel that they can participate in society. They can take advantage of, new websites that the governments provide to interact with public authorities and so on. So this closes the part on the policy initiatives. On the funding initiatives, I would say that, the multi-financial framework was approved last year with incredible marathon meetings, but we managed to have the biggest, the most important, and the most structural, if you want, multi-financial framework, where the member states have committed to very important amounts of funding from European level to help us not only recover from COVID-19, but also to prepare the future. And in this respect, I would just like to mention Erasmus+, of course, because it's one of the main funding instruments for vocational education and training. And there are many novelties that Erasmus+ provides this year, in particular for VET, international mobility. Various initiatives like the Centers of Vocational Excellence, and the Parliament and the Council were very supportive of this initiative, and even proposed to double the amount that the Commission had asked, in particular on the COMECE in relation to Erasmus Plus, but also beyond Erasmus Plus. I would just like to mention, because quite often we forget, and Don Bosco has a very important role in this, and Alfredo reminded me when he connected from Nairobi, that Europe is the biggest provider of development aid in vocational education and training. Just in the previous programming period, Europe provided something like 700 million euros. Not 700 euros, 700 million euros to modernize vocational systems throughout the developing world. This is also a very important element of funding. And then finally, just to conclude, the policy initiative that I was talking about that completes this trio of action that we've been doing at the European level. In this respect, I would like to mention what we are doing on apprenticeships. In fact, right now, there's a big conference going on together with the Committee of Regions, in which we are talking about how apprenticeships can contribute to the development of cities and regions. The Pact for Skills, where we're trying to bring together all the partners that have a role, so beyond the education and training sector, the companies, social partners, bring everyone together to confront this big challenge we have of equipping people with the skills for the digital and the green transitions. I mentioned other initiatives like the individual learning accounts that we are working on right now to empower people, to give people the opportunity to decide for themselves what do they want in terms of their lifelong learning and career development, and invest in education and training for that purpose. And finally, to mention the Centers of Vocational Excellence, as I said, that had the strong support from the Council and the Parliament, where we are trying to come up with a model that will allow the modernization of vets to be ready to equip both the young people with the skills they need for the transition from the education sector to the labor market, as well as the adults. And this, I think, is a very important challenge, that all the adults that are already working, I mean us, the more than 300 million Europeans that are already in the labor market and will see their jobs change in very radical ways. We have to give a very important focus on this aspect of providing the education system with the mechanisms that allow to reach out to this public. So the COMECE have that objective. And just finally, Emilio, to say what are the challenges in which we have to work on at the European level. In the vet field, as Janine already mentioned, we have very specific targets that we have to work on at the European level. First of all, is make sure that the learners that are coming out of the vet system are ready for the labor market. And for that, we want to have at least 60% of all learners with a very important exposure to work-based learning, so that before they go into the labor market in the education system, they've already been in a company. They know what waking up early in the morning and being at the job at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and the work ethics, the experience that will allow them for this transition. There's the target of ensuring that vet is of quality and relevant for the labor market, and that 82% of the recent graduates of vet are have a job when they leave the system. And finally, the mobility experience of 8%. We want at least 8%. It's still a small number, but it's progress compared to what we have now. We want at least 8% of all people going through vet having a mobility experience. And Erasmus Plus, I think with the doubling of the budget, will allow for EU funding to support this objective. So this is what I had to say until now, and then if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you once again, Emilio and Renato, for inviting me to contribute to these events that you organize. Thank you.
Thank you.